Hello, BookTube. I have a little Brattle book haul to show you. I went to the Brattle bookshop first thing this morning. I was supposed to meet young Ryan there, but he backed out at the last minute. I said, why? And he said, because I hate you. And I said, what, why? And he said, because you smell. So I went on my own. Fortunately, I am well familiar with going to the Brattle bookshop on my own. It's a used bookstore in the heart of downtown Boston. I've been going for a long, long time. They have books on every subject under the sun except romance, and they also have a sale lot next door to the store that's huge. It's not just one outside shelf or two. It's the whole floor plan of another building covered in books, covered in $1, $3, and $5 books. So I spent a lot of time out in the sale lot. I had only a couple of errands to run in the area of the Brattle, so I had time to loiter around out in the sale lot. It was always a lot of fun. You never know what you're going to see from day to day. Even if you look at every book, your eyes are going to glaze over. At some point or other, your eyes are going to glaze over. Plus, other customers are moving the books around all day, every day, too. So, that's the beat behind me. So I found a bunch of stuff. And there's a bunch of mass market paperbacks. There are some trade paperbacks. There are some hardcovers. There are all kinds of prompts for these things. Is it BookTube made me do it? Is it BookTube event? And I'll clear the air as much as possible ahead of time and say that I have had complex personal relationships with two of the authors whose books I bought today. Now, if I get that out of the way, then maybe ranting about them will not consume the video, which would be great. It would be absolutely great if that didn't happen. So the first three that we'll look at will be historical fiction. I found another book by Graham Diamond. I found a novel of his starring Sinbad the Sailor that I vaguely remembered. I found another one of his, Marrakesh Nights, which I guess is a sequel to a book he wrote called Marrakesh. I did not see Marrakesh. I glanced at this cover and saw right away that I should be looking for that book, but I didn't see it today. But this was $1, and it is largely the author's responsibility to make sure that I don't feel like I need to read the sequel or the prequel to this book. So I will give it a try, absolutely. I'm not sure if, like the Sinbad book, it will have, minor elements of the supernatural. We shall see. Then this next one, I made mention of the fact on some video recently that the American Revolution has never had a truly great novel. And I got a lot of feedback from a lot of you, testy feedback, but we specialize in testy feedback here. Since, once again, I want to point out, this is not heart surgery. We are all allowed to have strong opinions as long as we all like each other. I got a lot of feedback about that contention. A lot of people pointing out Johnny Tremaine, or Rabble in Arms, or a couple of others that I have read, of course. I was very appreciative of the fact that none of the feedback came in the form of have you read questions. That was great. Obviously, I wouldn't make a sweeping pronouncement like I don't think there's been a great book about the American Revolution if I hadn't read them all. Obviously, I wouldn't do that. But one of you, actually a couple of people, pointed out a novel that I have not read in a long, long time. And I happened across a copy today. It's a paperback copy. It won't survive the one reading that I will give it. But I honestly don't think this is it, or it would have stuck in my mind. This is Walter Edmonds' novel, Drums Along the Mohawk, that was made into a John Ford movie that some of you may know. That's not one of Ford's better movies. But I will read this again in just the chance that I got my sweeping declaration wrong. But I think I'm due to reread this anyway, but I think what rereading this will really underscore is the difference between a great American Revolution novel and a great novel set during the American Revolution. They are two different things, right? Obviously, they are two different things. I mean a novelization, a novel that is about the American Revolution, rather than a novel that happens to take place in the Mohawk Valley while, something's going on over in Boston. We shall see. There are evil, dastardly British in here, so maybe it counts. We'll give it a try. I will absolutely give it a try. I wasn't going to turn it down for $1. Then this thing, which I do not know at all, I just a total blank. One of the nice things about the Brattle Bookshop is that you can take a flyer when you're there. You can, if you're out in the sale lot and, you pick up a book and it looks a little interesting, you might be interested in giving it a try. If you do that at your local bookstore, that's $30 that you'll be spending. If you do it at the Brattle, it's $1. So I often do that. I learn a lot from the Brattle Bookshop sale lot because I can take chances all the time. I found this thing by A.M. Mon called Harry of Monmouth. Rather attractively designed thing. This is a historical novel about Henry V. It has blurbs. Let's see here. Far above the level of the most serious contemporary fiction, epic in scope, a blazing, vivid evocation of the turbulent life in 15th century times of Henry V of England. Breathtaking. That's from the Spokane Daily Chronicle. Is the Spokane Daily Chronicle still in operation? I'm assuming that if they are, they've seen better days and they no longer do any kind of original book reviewing. If they do original book reviewing, perhaps I'd like to drop them a dime and find out what the terms and conditions are. Maybe they want a reviewer. The Spokane Daily Chronicle, how much you want to make a bet that it disappeared in the 80s when so many regional newspapers disappeared. Then, reading is sheer delight when a book such as this is put into one's hands. That's from something that's just blurbed America. So is that America Magazine, American Broadcasting Network? No idea. Then we have highly readable, vastly entertaining, lively, infuses past events with the color, drama, and importance of immediacy. Beautifully written and handsomely executed. And that's from the Boston Herald. Back when, is this going to be in the 1950s when this thing was written? I have to be careful with it. I don't want to destroy it before I've even read it. 1956. Yeah, and back in 1956, the Boston Herald is the joke Boston paper. Boston used to be a 3-paper town. Now it's barely a 2-paper town. There's the Boston Globe, which is our version of a real newspaper. And then there's the Boston Herald that's fond of 20-point type and exclamation points and has all sorts of puzzles in it. But once upon a time, the Herald was a real paper. Very much a real paper. So I don't discount a review, a blurb from the Boston Herald. And then there's the most authentic historical novel of the decade. The 1950s was not exactly skimping on historical novels that had wide renown. And that's from Christian Herald magazine. So I'm really curious about the Spokane Daily Chronicle, whether or not it still exists. I'll have to make a mental note to look for it and to offer my services. Perhaps they want a columnist or a book reviewer. But I've read precisely no good historical fiction about Henry V. I've read a lot of it, but I've read none that was any good. The closest it would come if you stray away from the genre of novels would be Shakespeare's play. But if this will change that, I'll absolutely do it. I spot, you historical reenactors will also spot, no less than 3 anachronisms on this cover. But you're not going to hold that against the book. So those were 3 historical fiction items that I found. They were all together. They were all cheap. They definitely intrigued me. And they weren't exactly BookTube made me do it because there is no great historical fiction BookTube event. I really, really wish there were. That would be terrific. It's an incredibly popular subgenre of fiction. It deserves an event. But there isn't one, so I'll just read it on my lonesome. But these next books are inspired by a BookTube event. Coming up in November, in addition to Nonfiction November, and in addition to NaNoWriMo and a bunch of other things, is Dr. November. This is a BookTube event. I'm one of the hosts. We are reading and celebrating espionage and secret agent literature, fiction and nonfiction, for the month of November. I have a bunch of it already, but I naturally, when the Brattle sale lot served up a whole bunch more, I grabbed it all. I grabbed as much as seemed interesting. So I found this thing, for instance. This is apparently part of a series, just like From Russia with Lust to Russia with Lust. This is part of a series. It's by Edward Ahrens, and it's called Assignment Black Viking. And there is a secret agent fighting Vin from Revenant Reads. I don't know anything about this at all. Nothing about the book, nothing about the series, nothing about the author. Something damn strange was happening to the weather. Not just freakish blizzards in the Sahara, but unseasonable monsoons and typhoons in the east. savage hurricanes and tornadoes in the U.S., and in Europe, disastrous floods and snow. So, 2023, but when this thing was probably written in the 70s, I'm sure that the author, 1967, the author had no idea that would seem just, that a 15-year-old picking this book up in 2023 would say, what's freakish about that? There's nothing freakish about any of that. Meteorologists were predicting a new ice age, but the CIA was not convinced, nor was the KGB. To them, it looked as if the old quip about the weather had been insanely twisted. Nobody was talking, but somebody was certainly doing a hell of a lot about the weather. The problem was so serious that the mass of deceit laid aside their masks and plot to meet in Belgium and select an elite team to locate the source of the weather disturbance and eliminate it. Durrell, I guess that's him, heads the team, and his search leads them far up the Baltic through hurricane winds and snow to the northernmost reaches of Sweden. In this storm-racked and foreboding setting, Sam, I guess that's Sam Durrell, hopes to find the eccentric scientist who holds the key to an assignment so strange it is totally believable. Okay, Sam, it's not how you wear that hat, and you might want to smile. You're on the cover of a book, but I don't know anything about this. On the back, assignment is capitalized, so I'm assuming maybe this is a series, and every book in the series starts with the word assignment. We shall see. It sounds a lot more James Bondy than it does spy or espionage related. One of the ways for Dr. November, well, I've been emailing with a lot of you, and we've been getting lots of comments on videos. And one of the ways that I've been trying not to be a spoil sport is to point out that James Bond is almost never acting in the capacity of a spy. But this has, a crazy villain and a weird outre plot, and I'm sure that there'll be an agent involved. I'm sure that, what's his name again? Sam Durrell is probably an agent of something. So, well, I'll definitely give it. It definitely counts. The umbrella for Dr. November is pretty broad. Then this next one is Ross Thomas. This is Cold War Swap. I believe this is his debut novel from I want to say the late 1960s. 1966. I have read only a handful of Ross Thomas, and I don't think I've ever read anything of his that was specifically Cold War related, specifically spy related. I think this was the first thing he ever wrote, about Mac McCorkle and Michael Padillo, intelligence operatives in West Berlin using a bar as cover for their work. Mac must spring to his partner's aid when their superiors decide to sacrifice Padillo in a cynical deal with the Soviets in order to recover 2 defectors from Moscow. And Anthony Boucher praised this in the New York Times. So, not that I'm going entirely by blurbs, but it's hard not to. I'm a book reviewer, and my blurbs are on lots and lots of books out there in the wild, going back 20 or 30 or 40 years. So it's natural for me to look at blurbs and see what they say. Of course, you never know. The reviewer could have been phoning it in. The reviewer could have been bought. One steak dinner might have been all that it took to get Anthony Boucher in his salad days to praise this thing, even though it might be a piece of crap, or it might have tons and tons of debut novel faults to it. The proof will be in the pudding. The proof of the pudding will be in the eating. I will definitely read it for Dr. November. I'm going to need a lot of books to get me through November if I read a lot. And then this next one, the third of these paperback spy novels, is On Hazardous Duty by David St. John, about a CIA operative. It's a really good cover. I really like the cover design. Just think it's fantastic. Of course, David St. John is a pen name for a CIA operative named E. Howard Hunt. E. Howard Hunt wrote under a number of pseudonyms, only one of which actually involves me, and was also deeply involved in everything evil in the 21st century. Almost everything evil. And I say almost only because the jury's not completely in whether or not he was involved in the assassination of John F. Kennedy. But he was certainly involved in the subversion and overthrow of democratic regimes all over the Southern Hemisphere. And he was involved in Watergate. He was a thoroughly evil man. This is a novel about a CIA operative by a CIA operative, and I scorned this thing when it first appeared. And I've scorned it ever since, but it's 2023, and neither Everett nor I nor anybody ever thought that we would see the year 2023. He didn't, but maybe he's watching from hell. It's 2023, it's a new century, it's possible. E. Howard Hunt wrote for his whole life. He wrote all the time, and was accounted by people whose judgments are not bad, an effective writer, even when he was writing potboiler trash that he didn't want to put his name on. He wrote lots, so it's probably high time that I read this just as a spy novel. It did well as a spy novel. If memory serves, it did better than any of his other fiction, under any name. We will see. I will read it simply thinking of David St. John. I will read it just as though it were written by a guy named David St. John for Dr. November. So those were 3 Dr. November picks. Then we have 3 science fiction fantasy picks. There is a great need for an event here too, right? And not to step on delicate ground here, but the Bookish Bryants used to be booktubers, a married couple. They were wonderful, and they came up with New Worlds November and February Fantasy Stories. 2 events, one for science fiction, one for fantasy, but they're gone from BookTube, and they've left no trace, no word. So it feels a little wrong to me to continue those events when their founders are not around. What I would like instead is a gigantic BookTube event dedicated to either fantasy and science fiction, or fantasy and science fiction both at the same time. That would be great. But I read the stuff anyway, whether there's a BookTube event or not. And I found 3 paperbacks. I found this thing. It was $1, so I grabbed it even though I already have a copy. This is Sterling Lanier's book, Hero's Journey, with a great Darrell K. Sweet cover. That man there is Hero Destime. This is a long post-apocalyptic future in America, where wildlife has been changed and mutated in a lot of ways. There, many North American native species have achieved a kind of limited sentience. There are great mutated creatures all over the place. Hero Destime rides Klutz, his Morse, which is kind of, I think, a combination of moose and horse. Klutz is enormous. He's incredibly powerful. It's like riding a moose. In this scene, he meets with a tribe of sentient bears. But he has all sorts of adventures in the course of this book, all of which are trending towards the MacGuffin of this book, which is a computer. A problem-solving, world-changing type of computer, which would not have been known. This is from the 1980s, I think. 1973. So Sterling Lanier wouldn't have had any idea the extent to which computers would run the world in only 50 years. Or maybe he would. Maybe that's what he was thinking of for his post-apocalyptic. This is terrific stuff. It's a little stodgily written, but I love it. He wrote 2 books about Hero Destime. I could have taken 10 more. He wrote Hero's Journey and The Unforsaken Hero. And I found this. I've always loved it. I've been reading it and rereading it since it came out in this paperback. There are scenes in here that I just will remember forever, even though I know that technically speaking, they're not all that good. There's one scene where Hero and Klutz are in the borderland of a mutated swamp when a frog, a giant mutated frog that's as big as a building, leaps out of the rushes. It doesn't notice them. It's involved in its own hunting or its own mating. And they have a moment looking at this thing where they realize our firearms, our courage, don't mean anything. If this thing notices us, it will kill us. Just offhandedly, it won't even care that it's doing it. And that and other scenes like it really are a good counterbalance to the rather snidely whiplash bad guys in here. The bad guys in here are really bad. But I now I have a second copy. I don't need to keep grabbing copies of this, and maybe an imminent reread is in order. You never know. Then this next one I remembered from, as soon as I saw it, I remembered thinking that I should keep an eye out for it. When I saw it in a Michael K. Vaughan video that he did almost a year ago, I think, he did a video about sword and sorcery books and series. If I remember, I'll try and find the video. He included in that rundown, it was sort of a ranking of some of his favorites, and he included in that rundown one fantasy series that is never included in any such rundowns. And I remember when I saw it on his video, I remember thinking, the next time I find a copy of that, I remember liking the whole series. I really should find them again. And I found one today. These are the Amaro books of Charles Saunders. And I found The Quest for Kush in these yellow spine Daw paperbacks, which you used to see everywhere in used bookstores. And like all mass market paperbacks, they are getting rarer and rarer as they get destroyed, as they get kept, as they get out of circulation. They're not made anymore. There were only a finite number of them. So I remember, I think I've read 3 Imaro books. And it's hazy, but I'm remembering that I like this one by far more than any of the others. When did this come out? I remember when I saw it on 1984, when all the world made sense. When I saw this on Michael K. Vaughan's video, I remembered instantly thinking, well, I don't care about subsequent reprints or anything like that. I know that I want the Daw mass market paperback, and I at the time thought you'll never see it again. I think he did it for Day of Might, the Sword and Sorcery one-day booktube event that really ought to be a month of Might. I think that's coming up in late October or in November. I think that's coming up. Where you celebrate sword and sorcery fantasy. That also needs a whole event of its own. But this is unusual stuff. Charles Saunders was an incredibly unusual guy. His own worst enemy in a number of ways. No biography, as far as I know, has ever been written about him. Not that I've ever seen. But this is unusual in that it's epic fantasy that's Afrocentric. It isn't an epic fantasy like the million epic fantasies that is vaguely Nordic in origin. It's not anything like that. And it really works. If memory serves, it's been a long time, 40 years since I read this, so I'll give it another try now that I found the one that I remember liking more than any other. And then the third of the SFF books that I found today is just a weird thing. I grabbed it. There's no reason for me to have it. I have all of its contents, but I'd never seen it before. This is You Will Never Be the Same, a Berkeley mass market paperback of Cordwainer Smith. And, you see Cordwainer Smith repackaged all the time in mass markets of one kind or another. And there's always that brief flutter of hope in the heart, because the number one thing that everybody who's read this author wants is more of this author, and there isn't anymore. It's the same thing with a lot of greats in science fiction. Same thing with, like, James Tiptree. You want there to be 10 novels, and there aren't. And that's what this is. You Will Never Be the Same is just a repackaged collection of some of the great short stories of Cordwainer Smith. What is in here? When did this is a Berkeley paperback from 1963. Here we have No, Not Rogov. We have The Lady Who Sailed the Soul. We have Scanners of In Vain, of course, probably his most famous story. We have The Game of Rat and Dragon. Oh my, what a story. We have The Burning of the Brain. We have Golden, the Ship Was 000. We have Alpha Ralpha Boulevard, also a great story, and Mark Elf. I do not need this. I have the old Del Rey Best of Cordwainer Smith that has everything. I have a couple of different ebooks. These short stories are in all kinds of anthologies, but I've never seen this before. That is kind of neat as a cover, so I grabbed it. You don't need much. You don't need much in the way of justification when you're grabbing $1 books. You really don't. It's one of the joys of the Brattle. Then what is this next? Oh, okay. This next one is not from the Brattle. This is from the Mail. This comes out in February. It's here with these books. I must have just sorted it by mistake. This is in the W.W. Norton is doing Norton Shorts, shorter books, conceptual books that are fewer than 150 pages. I sound a little doubtful there because I don't appreciate, usually, publishers do this all the time. I think it's to woo timid readers, people who aren't really sure that they're up for the mental exercise of reading, to lure them to pick up a book. Same thing with the very short introduction series from Oxford. I sound doubtful because I am. I found almost none of those books satisfying. It's the way to put it. I don't know what this will be. This one seems to have a twinkle in its eye, so maybe it will be satisfying. This is by Dennis Yi Tenon, and it's called Literary Theory for Robots. And let's see what we have here. This comes out in February. The author is a writer, physician, programmer, and attorney. Okay, all right. If that's not stretching the blanket, then I guarantee you he's really bad at 2 out of those 4 things. This book reveals the hidden history of modern machine intelligence, taking readers on a spellbinding journey from medieval Arabic philosophy to visions of a universal language, past Hollywood fiction factories and missile defense systems trained on Russian folktales. Intelligence expressed through technology should not be mistaken for a magical genie capable of self-directed thought or action. Rather, in highly original and effervescent prose, with a generous dose of wit. Okay, that's what I'm hoping. That's what this seems like. Former Microsoft engineer and professor of comparative literature Dennis Yi Tenon asks us to read past the artifice to better perceive the mechanics of collaborative work. Okay, does he have a co-author, or is he saying that if you work with an AI, you're collaborating with that AI? Something as simple as a spell checker or a grammar correction tool embedded in every word processor represents the culmination of a shared human effort spanning centuries. Okay, it does very much represent the culmination of a shared human effort, but it does not span centuries, of course, since it involves electronics. It absolutely relies on algorithms. So it does not span centuries. It has nothing to do with Russian cosmonauts or with Arabic mathematicians in the 4th century. It doesn't have anything to do with them at all. It is a collective human endeavor, yes, but it doesn't even span 1 century. With its masterful blend of history, technology, and philosophy, Yi Tenon's work ultimately urges us to view AI as a matter of labor history, celebrating the long-standing cooperation between authors and engineers. Okay, all right. All right, well, this is certainly going to be worth reading in the new year. I won't read it until the new year, but that seems just wrong. Almost the way, I mean, this is the pub sheet, not the book. So, the author might hit completely different notes. Almost every way that is being framed in this thing sounds wrong. This book provides a crucial context for recent developments in AI, which holds important lessons for the future of humans living with smart technology. Okay, well, this comes out in February. It's not long. What are these called? Norton shorts are not long. They aren't cheap. Even though they're not long, they're not cheap. This is $22. When it comes out, it will be $22. Is that a hardcover or paperback? Hardcover. Yeah, it'll be a $22 hardcover when it comes out in America in February. But it's a fascinating subject. So sorry, throw you a little curveball there. If I remember, I'll try to note in the title that it includes a new book. Then we have a joy of a find. We'll move on to the hardcovers now. I have a joy of a find here. This is a series, an author that I have, extolled forever and ever on this channel. I found Don Camillo and His Flock by Giovanni Guarasci. And this is the story of a priest in a small Italian town called Don Camillo. And ordinarily, the Don Camillo books are about Don Camillo's two-fisted rivalry with the communist mayor Peponi, the mayor of his town. It's actually a three-way contest because Don Camillo's temper often gets the best of him, and so does Peponi's. They are old comrades from the war, but they are on different sides of every issue now. It's essentially their little town in the Po Valley is essentially caught between two strongmen who don't like to knuckle under either one to the other. You get the sense that these two are closer than brothers, but they lock horns constantly. That's two parts of the triangle, and the third part is Jesus Christ, who often talks to Don Camillo from the crucifix over the altar in his church, and is not often on Don Camillo's side. He is constantly reminding Don Camillo that the best use to which he can put his shovel-sized fingers, his shovel-sized hands, is to clasp them in prayer, not to grab a bench plank and crack it over Pepponi's head. But if I remember correctly, Don Camillo and his flock takes a little bit of the spotlight away from Pepponi and gives us, as the title indicates, a few stories of the other people that Don Camillo deals with as part of his duties. Doesn't matter to me. I think these things are absolutely marvelous. In a tiny, tiny handful of perfect pleasure books that the 20th century provided. 20th century gave us a lot of horrible stuff and a lot of very serious stuff, but it also gave us a small breviary of perfect escape books. Books that exist in their own perfect little world. The outside world can impinge on that world, but it doesn't matter. You can go and live there in your mind. And that is just, it is an amazing gift for an author to be able to do that. And so finding these things, oh my God, they can make the difference between a rotten day and a great day. They can turn things around because you just go to Don Camillo's little town in the Po Valley and spend time there. In the same way that this belongs to the evergreen perfect class of books like the Jeeves and Wooster books of P.G. Wodehouse, for instance, or Rumpole of the Bailey at number 3, Equity Court, or even, as I've lately reminded myself, Miss Reed. This belongs to that kind of thing, where there are always tempests and teapots, and you just go and live there. The Map and Lucia books, the same way. So I would gladly grab all of these until I have a whole set of, I think Gurashi did 5 of these, I think. There was an omnibus edition. There was a big omnibus edition that I wish I could find. I had it once upon a time. It was part of a book club of some kind or other, like 50 years ago. And the cover featured the actor who was in, I think, the BBC adaptation of some of these. Long gone. Never seen it again. Never seen that compilation. Never seen that omnibus volume in the wild. So I grabbed this when I could find it. Then this next one is a classic. BookTube made me do it. I saw this referred to many, many times on Randy Ray's channel, The Literate Texan. And it was $1, so I broke down and got a copy that I will reread. I will reread The World According to Garp by John Irving. I will assume an altitude of 30,000 feet and read this book as just a book by a guy named John Smith. That's what I will do. That's what I will try to do. I will try to read this without any reference to Iowa or Clothesline or first drafts that go missing or late night phone calls. I will read this just as a book. This, of course, was John Irving's huge breakout book. He had a few books before this, then he wrote this, and the world was his oyster. Money flowed in for the first time. Fame all over the world flowed in. Obviously, no one ever expects that. I am perfectly willing to admit that the phenomenon of Garp overshadows the book. It doesn't anymore. No one cares about this book anymore. But once upon a time, in the 20th century, everybody knew this book. Even non-readers knew this book. They knew this and they knew Portnoy. And that tended to overshadow the book. So, my hat's off to Randy Ray. I will read this as simply a book. And I will report back. We will see what I have to say. Then I found this thing. I remember this from, what was this? 2015? 2007. This is by William F. Buckley. This is Cancel Your Own Goddamn Subscription. The title of the book referring to the stereotypical irate letter that the National Review used to get Mr. Buckley, you've gone too far. You have outraged all common decency. Please cancel my subscription. The stereotypical outraged, pearl clutching letter used to say that, used to end with "please cancel my subscription." That's where this title comes from. Cancel your own goddamn subscription. But it's not a long thing. It's Bill Buckley picking and choosing his snappy zingers to a lot of the mail that National Review got. And there are some other bits and pieces in here as well. This is, in many ways, a more effective way to capture the spirit of the man than any of the stuff that's been written, the stuff that he's written, or stuff that other people have written about him or about the National Review or his collected writings or whatnot. In many ways it is. Despite the sometimes horrible things that he wrote and said, despite the sometimes horrible things that he birthed into the world and gave the veneer of intellectual respectability, and despite his connection with E. Howard Hunt, you would never in your life have met a kinder and sweeter man than William F. Buckley. I know that's not the image that National Review likes to brandish, and I know that's not the image that has survived in oral histories and whatnot. But it's nevertheless true. I don't know if it will add an extra flavor to this book to know that side of William F. Buckley will almost certainly not be reflected in these pages. These pages will be for the wit, the gadfly, the great finger-upper of zingers and quips and whatnot. I could be wrong. When this came to the bookstore where I was working in 2007, I largely ignored it. And I think, if I remember correctly, I largely ignored all the critical press about it too. So I'll be coming to it just clean. It was $1, so if I don't keep it, it's no big deal. None of these things are. Like I said, that's the great thing about the Brattle. And then we come to the last of the books and also the last item in Dr. November. And that is Len Deighton. Famous spy fiction writer, also wrote a very good one-volume history of the Second World War, a very good one-volume history of the Battle of Britain. He was fond of, he wrote a lot. He was extremely prolific. He was fond of gimmicky spy books. I just recently read for the first time, Twinkle Twinkle Little Spy by him, and didn't really like it at all. It seemed kind of a cheap and junky book. And when I was done with that, I thought, well, okay, but you've read books by Len Deighton that you really liked. Winter is a genuinely impressive novel. Not a spy novel, really, but still. I thought, you try another one of these. So I tried, what is it called? Goodbye, Mickey Mouse? I couldn't get even 50 pages into the thing. It was just so bad. So apparently for Dr. November, Len Deighton is going to be an up and down roller coaster ride for me. Looking forward to that. Absolutely looking forward to that. But I found one of those anthology volumes that I love so much. One hardcover that has a whole bunch of books. This has his his game set and match books. So you have Berlin Game, Mexico Set, and London Match. They were a trilogy. You can find these things, Berlin Game, Mexico Set, London Match, as separate books. But I found this neat hardcover with the deckled edges and everything. So this will absolutely work, and it'll go on my. I have a shelf of these collected volumes. So I seem to remember these Samson novels are really well regarded. I think I read them all, and I don't think I have negative memories of any of them. But it has been quite some time, so it's high time. I mean, Dr. November notwithstanding, it's high time that I gave these things a reread. When did this come out? So, Berlin Game, Set, Mexico Set, and London Match all came out during the 1980s. And then this big volume came out in 1986. So, this is great for a start, but I have a lot of Len Deighton as ebooks. The one that I'll read these and see how they hang together. That will be the main factor of interest for me in reading this hardcover. I will read it as a book. I will read it from front to back. And the main quality of interest for me would be to see how the books come across differently than the way I originally read them, which was, I read Berlin Game, and then I read 50 more novels and then 20 histories in that year, and maybe went to Paraguay or whatnot, and or trekked in the Sahara. I forgot all about it. Then I saw, oh, Mexico set. Oh, I see what you're saying. Game, set, match. Oh, I see. I get it. I probably read Mexico set, in Italy or on the African savannah, tossed it off, didn't care anything about it, read 50 more books, that sort of thing. And then London Match the same way. Here I will be reading them together to see how they hang together and to see how they work as a book or as a trilogy. I bet not well at all, but we shall see. The one thing for Dr. November that I was kind of hoping I would see, you can't go to the Brattle with expectations. I was kind of hoping that I would see the old mass market paperback of the Ipcris file by Len Deighton, which I for some reason I have a hankering to reread it. I don't know why, but I had a mass market paperback, a really nice, solid mass market paperback eons ago. Read it, really liked it. In fact, I think it was the Ipcris file that made me think, okay, well, I should read more of this guy. I think that was the thing that did it. I've never seen that paperback again, so I don't know if I will. The Brattle might provide. There's still 2 weeks to Dr. November. But in the meantime, those were my Brattle books for today's morning visit. No particular reason to visit. It was a beautiful morning, nice and clear. The clearness has gone away, as you can tell from the dodgy light in this video. There have been massive cloud banks all of the rest of the afternoon, including there was a half an hour there where you felt like you needed to put lights on in the house. It was so dark. But it was a very nice morning, very temperate. No weather to speak of. I think the weather here is going to get a little closer and a little warmer until the weekend, when if I'm reading things correctly, we're going to bucket down rain here in New England. But we shall see. I thought that was true for this week too, and it didn't happen at all. So we have Len Deighton, Game, Set, and Match. We have Cancel Your Own Goddamn Subscription by William F. Buckley. We have The World According to Carp by John Irving. Randy Ray made me do it. We have Don Camillo and His Flock. Fantastic. I will find my other Don Camillo books. I think I have 2. So this will be 3. I'll just have to check and see how many more there are. We have Literary Theory for Robots, which is new. It's not from the Brattle. It comes out in February. We have You Will Never Be the Same, short stories by the great Cordwainer Smith. We have Imaro 2, Quest for Kush. We have Hero Destiny. We have Hero's Journey by Sterling Lanier. We have On Hazardous Duty by an author named David St. John. That's all. It's just an author named David St. John. Is it a good spy novel or is it not? That's all. We have Cold War Swap by Ross Thomas. Any of you fans of Ross Thomas? I'd love to know. We have Assignment Black Viking. How many assignments does this guy have? What's his name again? Durrell? No idea. No idea. We have Harry of Monmouth, a historical novel in paperback. Did it ever have a hardcover? Is the author known for writing historical fiction? We have Drums Along the Mohawk, a revolutionary era drama that I had forgotten when I was making offhanded references. And finally, Marrakesh Nights, the sequel to Marrakesh, but who knows? Who knows how badly you need to read Marrakesh? I'll find out. Anyway, sorry for the length of the video. That's what a Brattle book haul does. I'm going to dig into these things, and we'll see. I'm going to dig into these things, and I'm going to try to read them all as though they were written by Joe Smith with a bag over his head. That's the best way to do things. Absolutely. Judge the book on the book's own merits. So I'll wrap this up for now, and I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.